All right. Continuing on with our path to the beloved, romanticized American Civil War. Anywho, so the focus at this point is now on two main characters, really. So we've discussed, the problems with Texas, the Compromise of 1850, Bleeding Kansas, Dred Scott, and its impact as a Supreme Court case. These are all like critical elements, all kind of culminating together to really kick off this war, if you will, that we know is on the horizon. And really, the final players, if you want to put it that way, really come down to two individuals, Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln. All right. So these are two individuals from Illinois in the late 1850s. They're both running for the same congressional spot. So Congress, Washington, D.C. Congress. And they really got into it, really known for their debates between each other leading up to the congressional election. Now, interestingly enough, we really highlight Lincoln and his history, really. But Lincoln, in a lot of ways, Lincoln was a loser in this instance. He lost a lot. He lost a lot of elections he ran for. He struggled as a lawyer. He lost a lot of hearings. He really had quite the streak going on. So he goes at it with with Stephen Douglas. Now, what's unique about this is not the result, because predictability, he loses against Douglas, part number one. But really what happens is Lincoln really gets kind of cast into the spotlight because of his stance in relation to slavery at the time, because it was so significantly contrasted or different than Stephen Douglas when these debates took place. So these were known as the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and a lot of their debates revolved around the moral and ethical beliefs of how a society should function, really highlighting with, slavery as being the key element of discussion. The reason that we find this interesting in the modern day is because this form of debate, this one versus one, actually really culminates into what is called Lincoln-Douglas debate in 2021 at the high school, really competitive level, which is about morals and ethics. This is the origins of that. So a little tidbit off to the side there. So Lincoln and Douglas really kind of, as I said, they get into it for the discussion pieces on where they stand with slavery and how to keep the Union together and what needs to take place and who really is deemed as a citizen of the United States. They both have different opinions on that. Douglas ends up winning the election into Congress. However, Lincoln really ends up having the last laugh, because these two are going to find each other once again, to no surprise, really in the presidential election of 1860, because they're contrasting views. Now, when that happens, as we will discuss later, while the Lincoln-Douglas debates really start to highlight both characters and kind of put them on the platform, the election of 1860 really is the final, there's the match, and it lights up and it's gone. And that is the Civil War. But these two characters have to be in the setting or in the environment first before they can do any damage, if you want to put it that way. And this is really the highlight of them. What's unique about it is Stephen Douglas's take, when we look at his beliefs in the institution of slavery, is frankly kind of predictable. A little bit of an oddity for the sake of he resides in Illinois. So he is in a northern state, but his image or his beliefs in the system itself are kind of predictable. Lincoln is a little bit more drastic when it comes to slavery. But here's the thing to remember about Lincoln at this moment in his life. Lincoln is not a person at this moment who's coming out and saying, well, we need to eliminate slavery. That's the only way. We have to do this because it's inhumane. Lincoln is not that person yet. We have to remember, and arguably, we don't know if Lincoln ever is that person. Lincoln was very fond of saying, I will do really what it takes to keep the Union or the country together. And he says, one of his quotes from really the debates in the 1958, one of the quotes that he talked about that really sticks out is, If no slave gets freed, but it keeps the Union together, so be it. If every slave is freed and it keeps the Union together, so be it. And then in the end, he goes, if some are freed and some are not freed, but it keeps the Union together, so be it. The thing to remember about Lincoln is not an abolitionist. He is not a person who's coming out and saying the institution of slavery has to end because it's immoral. Lincoln's focus is, how do I keep the United States collective together as a nation? And if other people are in the way to prevent that, then we will hose them or get them out of the way in order to accomplish this task. It's one of the things we have to remember when we romanticize historical people, meaning when we look at people through the lens of 2021, go, oh my gosh, they did this in the history of the United States. There's things that they did. This is correct. There are things Lincoln did in his presidency, especially, that is really world renowned. But we also have to examine the human, the actual individual themselves, and realize that at times what we think is true in a historical perspective really is us just looking at history through rose-colored lenses, or meaning just looking at the happy parts of it, or looking at the parts that aren't necessarily entirely true. We find that today when we really start digging into Douglas and Lincoln's speeches, we start looking and going, interesting belief system going on with Lincoln primarily. And we say that not because of Douglas being like, oh, Douglas is the villain. Not that. It's because Lincoln winds up becoming president. Because of that, he winds up in the spotlight. So we take a closer look at him. And he's known for the Emancipation Proclamation, which is also like you need to read in between the lines on that one a little bit too. So this is the moment, really 1857, 1858. This is where Douglas and Lincoln really kind of like start this whole thing of getting the nation's attention on thinking about this idea of running for president. Really by 1860, we're going to see both of them. And then the election results are going to absolutely blow your mind.